So today we're going to talk about the Valorant Off-Patch podcast, which is a podcast that Riot make every time or at least they have done it for the last couple times that a patch has come out. And in the last one, they were talking about patch 5.12. I'll be going into, some of the things that they said in that patch. If you want to listen to the whole thing, I will leave a link in the description as well to go and listen to it. But it's quite interesting to hear what the devs have to say about the game, particularly because they seem to be, I'm not going to say calling out the community, but it seems pretty clear that in certain instances, what the community perception is and what the devs think about a thing seems a bit off. It seems a bit different in terms of opinion, I think. And, it was interesting to hear the devs explain this. And the first one of these instances that we're going to talk about is about Chamber's trademark change. And it's not necessarily about Chamber, it's more about Sentinels as a whole, right? And what really is a Sentinel. So let's listen to the podcast and see what they had to say. And whilst this is going on and I'm giving my reaction to it as well, let's watch some nice rounds of Pro Valorant.
About because I think players were starting to kind of warp their idea of like what a Sentinel would bring to the table in an everyday comp. On some maps, especially, people really expected a Sentinel to bring flank watch, and not all of them do. And having like a ungated global kind of trap really freed up Chamber to do whatever they liked. But it's a really strong output to be able to say, don't worry about Dish this time. We've got that, at least the intel, unless they smoke it off, etc.
Yeah, so it's clear that the devs don't think that having kind of a universal trap or universal flank watch is something that all Sentinels have. And I know a lot of people, freaked out about this, when Chamber kind of, way back in the day at this point, when he first lost the second trademark and it went down from 2 to 1, a lot of people were freaking out saying, he's not a Sentinel anymore, all of this, right? But it's clear that the devs believe you don't need to have any kind of flank watch to actually be a Sentinel. And that makes sense. And to be honest, those people freaking out at that time didn't make any sense to me because Sage was in the game for the whole time, right? Sage has always been there, and Sage never had a trap, and she's never not called a Sentinel, or she kind of is a bit different. It's a bit weird. But it's clear that in the devs' mind, at least, Sage is a Sentinel, right? And Sentinel to them, it seems like just means they are good at defending a space that you already own. That is what a Sentinel is good at, and, that kind of exists, across the 4 Sentinels. That's kind of the one thing that kind of brings them together in a way. And so it seems like, this kind of, as we go forward, and the next agent, by the way, is probably going to be a Sentinel as well. It seems that, maybe as we go forward, we can expect, more Sentinels that, don't have maybe any flank watch at all, or very restricted flank watch, right? And that is something that perhaps we need to get used to. And this idea that a lot of people have about what a Sentinel is actually a bit too simplistic and is a bit, not correct, really, because the devs are basically telling us, no, not every Sentinel is going to have flank watch. That isn't a requisite of being a Sentinel. The next big thing that I think there is a big disagreement with what the devs think to what the community thinks is about Harbor. Because if you ask most people how good is Harbor, most people will tell you he's trash, right? That he isn't very good, he still needs tons of buffs and whatnot. But it seems like the devs are kind of more on the side of he's actually not that trash. It's just that the people don't know how to play him yet.
Yeah, I think Harbor is a character that players have yet to master and really figure out. And I think when they do, Harbor will have a big increase in terms of win rate and play rate. And so I think it's like it takes people time to learn a new controller. And so we didn't want to overdo it. And especially with the cascade changes, we were giving another charge to being able to cast even more. And I think that opens up a lot of defaults and a lot of opportunities.
But yeah, it seems pretty clear that, the devs think that Harbor actually, might not be too bad, but they really don't want to, push the boat with a lot of big Harbor changes, right? I know that some people would probably want to see, a lot of big Harbor changes, right? Just change like a ton of things, right? Make his ult 6 cost, make the slows on the walls, 3 seconds or whatever, right? And just keep buffing him until he's good. But it's clear that perhaps the devs think that, because Harbor is a new controller, because perhaps he's a bit of a different controller as well, that it's actually, the people don't really know what they're doing with Harbor yet. And, with the changes that they've already made, perhaps they feel confident that, Harbor will be good in time. And so it'll be interesting to see, will that be the case, or will they have to buff Harbor again to kind of nudge people to actually, play Harbor? Because the way that this will probably work is, honestly, if a pro team goes out and starts playing Harbor on even just one map consistently and consistently wins and shows that Harbor can be good on that map, probably the perception will change very, very quickly, because then other pro teams will start doing it, and then people will start reporting, oh, Harbor's actually pretty good on this map, or, he's meta on this, right? And then the community perception changes as well. So really, it doesn't take, I think, a lot to get, public perception to change in a game like this. You basically just need, one pro team to kind of show all the other pro teams that this really can work, and that, picking Harbor is an advantage over others. And then the rest will probably follow, and then, everyone else will follow. That's kind of what happened with Neon, where Neon became meta on Fracture. Optic tried it first. It worked really well for them. They won a tournament with it. And then everyone else kind of, followed on. Everyone started picking Neon on Fracture. And then all of a sudden, everyone thinks, Neon's not that bad. That's probably, what perhaps the devs are expecting to happen with Harbor as well. But then finally, we have to talk about one specific thing about Harbor as well, which is its Cove ability, because I found this very, very interesting.
And one element of this that I see players kind of getting tripped up by is a lot of players are really wishing that the Cove shield would remain as a smoke after it gets destroyed. And I think that kind of speaks to maybe like part of the issue, where a lot of people see like, oh, that's kind of like a dome smoke. I want to use that in my traditional lineups. I want to put that in my repertoire. And it really just has this weakness that doesn't actually let you do that in a very effective way, unless you have teammates right there to capitalize. And I think it's interesting that players ask for that, because so much of Harbor's other abilities are vision blockers. So it's kind of interesting. It's like so much vision block, and then one ability that has this weakness that kind of removes this vision block. People immediately want more. And I think that just goes to show that people haven't like figured out how to utilize all of his walls and the shield grenade to their best use cases yet. And they're still kind of digesting, transferring over their mastery from other characters.
But yeah, basically, we've all just been put on absolute blast by a dev for not understanding how to use Harbor's abilities, and I think this is a good example, and I think this does speak to honestly what is going on, where a lot of people might put a Cove in a position like this, right, where a normal smoke would come in like this on ascent. But this is a really bad position for a Cove, because if you are executing onto that B side, right, anyone who's rotating across, well, they could just spam this as they kind of run, and this will go by the time that, you're actually coming in onto the site, and by the time that they are actually trying to defend it as well. So I think the idea is, instead of thinking of this Cove like you would a normal dome smoke, right, it needs to be used in different ways. And I was trying to figure out, okay, well, if we are going to use it in a different way, what different way would we use it in, right? And I think you have to be willing to put it in areas that can't be easily spammable, right? That's its weakness, that it can be spammed and then it goes. So you want to put it in areas where people either aren't going to shoot it, or if they do shoot it, that's going to give you some kind of information. For instance, what about something that lands like this, right? Where you come and put it on the top there, and it becomes a sort of one-way, right? Where anyone defending back here, you got a one-way on them and whatnot, and it makes it difficult to defend specifically this area, but not anywhere else. Right? Because if you're sitting in logs, you're not even going to shoot that, because it's not affecting you, and you don't want to give away the sound cue of where your position is because you're in logs, right? Why would you want to do that, right? So I think that this is kind of maybe more what they had in mind, where you can cause this kind of, one way like so, and the only people who are going to shoot this are actually the people who are defending here, right? So if then this does get shot like so, it gives you the information that, yes, someone is back in this kind of area here by the stairs, and then you can, use that to your, information, and you can use that to your advantage, and, potentially kill them, right? That's kind of the idea, and I think that that is what they are looking for, right? That this is not meant to be used like a normal dome smoke just because it is a dome smoke of sorts, right? It's meant to be used in positions that will maybe give away information, right? Obviously, people have used it for spike plants as well, of course, just putting it down, which I think would be part of what they're thinking of as well with this. But I do think that, I haven't really seen people use it in that way, right? And finding, like, interesting, areas, you could get a lineup that, can consistently land on this for sure, right? And create this kind of one way for people playing on this back stair area. You can do this consistently, I'm sure, from, back there or whatnot. It won't be too hard. So I think that this is what they are going for, right? This kind of different use of a Cove where if no one shoots it, that kind of gives you a bit of information. And if someone shoots it, that also gives you information, right? And so whilst it's there and whilst it exists up there, it's not going to get shot. It's going to last the whole time. And if it is there, that probably means there's no one back there. And, it's kind of almost clearing an angle for you in a weird sort of way, potentially. I think that that might be more of what they are going for. Just whilst we're talking about Harbor, because I don't think a lot of people know this, someone pointed out in my Discord, and I didn't know until they did, but Harbor's wall speed changes the speed that it goes across the map depending on where you're actually looking. So for instance, here's the normal one, right, of me looking just straight ahead. This is what it looks like on the map, right? That's the kind of normal speed of it. If I come and I just look like, 45, 50 degrees into the sky, it will go slower. You can see that this is much slower than the normal one. It still goes almost as far, but it does go a little slower. And then if I come and look all the way into the sky, right? So this is me looking all the way into the sky. Look at this thing crawl across the map. And the thing is, that wall ends up being tiny. So you can't really do it at that kind of really slow speed. But if you are struggling with a difficult wall that doesn't need to be like the full length of the wall, you can look up about 45, 50 degrees into the sky and just send it. And it becomes, slower and easier to control on the whole. And, potentially becomes a bit easier to do whatever wall you need to do. Just thought this was a quick pro harbor tip that I haven't seen really in a lot of other places. And so you've all been put on blast today by the Valorant devs, but I just thought it was quite interesting to see some of the differences that they have and kind of, what the devs see as part of the game, whereas what kind of, I think, the wider community sees as part of the game as well. And it's interesting to, see how the devs might go about, matching that up. For instance, if the community perception of Harbor does stay the same, that, he's trash and not worth playing, then of course the devs probably will be forced to, keep buffing him until people kind of, come to either a realization he wasn't ever that bad, or come to, just the point where he is good enough to definitely see play. And so I hope you enjoyed the video. If you do want to listen to the whole thing, go into the link in the description below, and I will see you next time.